Welcome and thank you all for joining us today for the AHRMM webinar, COVID-19 Vaccine Supply, Distribution, and Handling Overview, an Operation Warp Speed panel discussion. To begin today's webinar, we will play a short video on Operation Warp Speed.
Operation Warp Speed is a fast-paced effort to bring COVID-19 vaccines and therapeutics to the American people. I am General Gus Perna, and here are 5 things to know about Operation Warp Speed. First, Operation Warp Speed is a partnership between the Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Defense and other federal organizations to develop, manufacture, and deliver vaccines and therapeutics to the American people in order to move past this pandemic. Second, science is driving all of our decisions. We are not cutting any corners with respect to safety and efficacy. We need to do this the right way. We are working with 6 drug manufacturers who are putting their vaccine candidates through the same rigorous clinical trials that we do for every pharmaceutical. Third, we have worked with the manufacturers to help them scale up operations in order to produce vaccines and therapeutics. We have purchased and secured supplies needed to deliver and administer the drug. Everything from the vials that hold the vaccine to the syringes and needles that will be used to put shots into arms. Fourth, the military is bringing planning and logistics expertise to this operation, working across the supply chains from manufacturing to delivery to coordinate vaccines and their movement across the country to all states, territories, and federal agencies. But commercial industry, not the military, will physically ship and distribute the vaccines to your local areas. And fifth, Operation Warp Speed will be successful because of this whole of America approach, drawing from the best of industry, academia, science, and defense in order to fight this pandemic. We have been transparent and open about our process, and now it's up to you, America. When the vaccine is ready and available, I hope you answer the call. In order to learn more about Operation Warp Speed, check out the HHS and DoD websites.
Produced by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services at taxpayer expense.
Hi everyone, this is Mike Schiller, Senior Director of Supply Chain at AHRMM, and I will be moderating. Apologize, some technical difficulties. I will be moderating today's webinar. Some housekeeping items for today's call. All lines have been placed in a listen-only mode, but you can ask questions by typing them in the Q&A box. The Q&A box can be opened by hovering your mouse at the bottom of the WebEx browser, clicking the ellipses icon, the one with the 3 dots, and clicking Q&A. We will take questions throughout today's presentation, so please add your questions as you have them. After today's webinar, please complete the presentation evaluation so we can improve our education for you and other healthcare supply chain professionals. Registrants will receive their continuing education certificate about 2 weeks after completing the survey. We are pleased to welcome a great panel of speakers from Operation Warp Speed, sharing their knowledge on the COVID-19 vaccine supply and distribution. Let me start by introducing today's speakers. Ms. Marion Whicker, SES Deputy Chief Supply Production Distribution OWS. Colonel Victor Suarez, CMRP Vaccine Program Manager OWS. Mr. Darrell Rawlings, McKesson Vice President Enterprise Program Lead COVID-19 Vaccines. And Mr. Geoffrey Glauser, BARDA, Supply Chain SME and Consultant. Ms. Whicker, the floor is all yours.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. And welcome everybody to today's webinar. I'm thrilled to be here today representing Operation Warp Speed. You know, the video that you just watched by General Perna, he really says it right there with the couple things that he mentioned. It talks about doing it the right way. And in order to do it the right way, we have to make sure we have our process in place. Could we go to the next slide, please? So I apologize in advance for the eye chart, but I'll walk you through it so that we can talk about what are some of the goals the tenants, and then the process we've worked through from Operation Warp Speed in order to bring the vaccine to what we've already been doing in the last couple of days, the distribution. So when you think about the goals of Operation Warp Speed, first and foremost, ensuring the safety and effectiveness of any of the COVID vaccines, whether it's the Pfizer one that's out right now, the Moderna one that's currently being considered for emergency use, or the 4 other vaccines that will come behind it. Second goal, reduce the morbidity and mortality rates and get people healthy again. Supporting rapid vaccine through science and data and then proper distribution. And then most important, I think, to every American citizen is assisting with the return to our lives from a pre-pandemic perspective. In order to do such an uptake like this, an undertaking like this, we've got to make sure that we control and have visibility to the vaccines throughout the entire process. We've got to make sure that we have appropriate coverage for a vaccine, delivering them beyond the normal brick and mortar, and make sure they get into, when available, all Americans' arms. Tracking the uptake. So we've got the vaccines distributed, we've got them out to America, but tracking that uptake to make sure that all the vaccine allocated is actually being used. And then the last part, traceability, confirming where the vaccines were administered and going through the process. It's been a long several months as we did this, and I know in the video General Perna talked about, we don't cut corners. So one of the questions we're most often asked, then how did you do it? A lot of vaccines, when they roll out under normal circumstances, roll out in sequential events. What Operation Warp Speed did is many of the things in parallel. So when we were going through phase 3 clinical trials, we were also doing the manufacturing. So the risk was on the U.S. government and the investment in manufacturing while the trials were going on. Cutting no corners, again, ensuring safety and efficacy. The FDA plays a big part in it. They played a huge part last week in the emergency use authorization for the Pfizer vaccine, and they're doing the same right now as we speak in consideration for the Moderna vaccine. But there will be many steps in the FDA process to go through that vaccine, and we'll talk about that later. Manufacturing. We did many things in the manufacturing process in terms of what General Perna talked about, that whole of America approach. We made sure that manufacturers had the consumables they needed, had the equipment they needed, had the people that they needed. Oftentimes, we had to help supplement their workforce to get things done. Critical to this endeavor is the power of Operation Warp Speed, CDC, and our partners all across America. A couple of them that are on today, and we'll have time to talk. But then it's working through a distribution process, and with 6 different vaccines, sometimes it's going to be multiple different processes, and got a couple charts we'll show you about that. And then the distribution facilities, making sure those facilities are ready to accept the vaccines and the kits and then move them out. Finally, the administration sites. We've got multiple scenarios of how we're going to administer vaccines. There's certainly an approach when the supply of vaccine is much less than the demand. It'll be a more structured approach, more limited to where the sites go to. But as vaccine becomes more plentiful, you'll see it go out more to the brick and mortars, the pharmacies, and things that we would normally see in a flu vaccine, if you will. And most importantly, in the last part of this chart, is a new word that I learned, pharmacovigilance. So it just doesn't stop with putting a vaccine into someone's arm. It's making sure that we continue to monitor those vaccines with everybody that was administered that vaccine. So it's a great chart here, a lot of information on it, and we certainly can get it out to you. It's actually also posted on the Department of Defense website, but a lot of good information for the American people as to how we were able to do this as quickly as we were. So next slide, please. So there's really many milestones that we had to work through in terms of this process. Vaccine approval. I just talked about a minute ago, the phase 3 clinical trials. I used as a reference point, I learned this a couple weeks ago, that when we did the AIDS virus, clinical trial was about 7,200 people. For each of the vaccines that the United States government will be rolling out, clinical trials are in excess of 30,000 people. So a much broader swath of the American people to test the vaccines on. As we get done with the clinical trials and enough safety and data has been collected, the vaccines go through what we call the DSMB, the Data Safety Monitoring Board. Once they make their assessments, then it goes through the process that we're talking about today. The FDA, the VRBPAC, those processes will look at what we can do, and in the cases right now, one vaccine just received an emergency use authorization, Pfizer, and again, the Moderna vaccine is up for emergency use consideration. After a vaccine's approved, the prioritization becomes very important. And prior to those vaccines, a lot of work's being done ahead of time. So the National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine made some recommendations. ACIP makes recommendations, and then finally the Secretary of Health and Human Services takes those recommendations and then formalizes those. All of that then rolls into the allocation. And what Operation Warp Speed does is, from an allocation perspective, is we looked at many models. And what was settled on is, we believe, the most fair and equitable one. It's pro rata based on the population of the country. So a jurisdiction's population, what percent they are of the total population, as vaccine doses are allocated, that's how the allocation will come down to a jurisdiction. How a jurisdiction chooses to sub-allocate is part of that respective jurisdiction's micro plans, and Operation Warp Speed wouldn't dictate that to the individual jurisdictions. That would be the governor, the state health immunization officers that work up those plans. And then finally, the distribution. Distribution is critical. Once we complete the manufacturing of a product, we have to make sure that we have the supplies necessary to administer those vaccines. They're built into ancillary kits that we'll talk more about later. And then all of that is rolled into the distribution process and sent out to the administration facilities. Next slide. So for the two vaccines that are near and dear and on our radar screens, I'll just talk a little bit about the distribution processes, because they're actually quite different. The Pfizer vaccine, which we started distributing Monday, Pfizer is electing to do the distribution of their vaccines, and they're using FedEx and UPS. So a vaccine is received by FedEx and UPS from the Pfizer facility, and it's shipped directly to the administration site. Simultaneous to that vaccine leaving the Pfizer site, the ancillary kits to facilitate the doses of vaccines that are going to that administration site are sent as well. One of the things that we wanted to do early on was to make sure that having a vaccine without having the appropriate ancillary kits wouldn't be a problem. And so the configuration of the vaccine quantities, we have appropriate ancillary kits to that. So you'll see married up at the administration sites, and I was fortunate to actually be at University of Michigan Hospital on Monday and actually watch the delivery of the vaccine, and they had their ancillary kit delivered and watch the whole rollout of that vaccine. Now Moderna, as we prepare for the emergency use authorization for Moderna's approach will be a little bit different. The vaccine and the ancillary kit will be married up at a McKesson distribution site. McKesson is the central distributor for all of the vaccines with the exception of the Pfizer vaccine. When that vaccine and kit leave, they will leave together, be distributed by UPS and FedEx, and then going to the point of administration. So just a quick snapshot of how our processes are going. And so, Mike, I'd like to turn it back to you for you to introduce the remainder of our illustrious panel. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Marion. I appreciate that. Great coverage on the distribution process, clearly well thought out and articulated, and will be well executed, no doubt. So I want to go ahead and remind our attendees to please start entering your questions now. They will be asked. We've got 6 questions that we're going to be going through with the panelists. They're going to be some very detailed responses. And at the conclusion of each one of these question sessions, we'll go ahead and answer or ask the questions that you are posing. Again, we want to tie the questions you're asking with the appropriate question to just remain and contain or can keep some continuity in this entire process. So let me start with the first question for the panelists. Vaccines are being developed by multiple companies. Are the Operation Warp Speed vaccine distribution partnerships different? And how are the shipments being allocated and prioritized, centralized, regionally, by state, et cetera? I know, Marion, that you covered some of this, and not sure if there's other content or perspectives that the other panelists would like to include at this time.
Sure, Mike. Hey, my name is Colonel Vic Suarez, and I'm one of the Operation Warp Speed vaccine managers assigned to the Moderna product coordination team. And so what I'd like to kind of start off and address that is, yes, Operation Warp Speed is engaged with 6 different manufacturers through different contractual arrangements that we've leveraged for research and development, scale up of manufacturing, and production in large quantities in multi-dose vials. The first regulatory hurdle within all this is filing for an emergency use authorization. We see that as a milestone. We refer that to as the EUA. This is followed by, a series of, after manufacturing, of filling the product into vials, packaging, and then making it available for distribution in a mass scale for immunizations across the country. For those manufacturers that have successfully filed their product with the FDA, our number one goal is FDA licensure. EUA is really just a milestone on our path to full licensure. And I'll pass it back to Ms. Whicker, who can talk a little bit more about the allocation at the federal level.
Thanks, Vic. I appreciate that. And so, as I mentioned earlier, allocation at the federal level is really based on pro rata. So we have 64 what we call jurisdictions, 50 states, 8 territories, and then 6 major cities. And so based on the population of those cities and the available doses, allocation is simply a math problem. It is allocated based on your population. So if you looked at the recent rollout of the Pfizer vaccine, we had roughly 6.5 million doses. And so we took a multi-step approach, and I'd like to walk you through it so that people understand that is one of the questions we're asked most often. Number one, we kept a portion of it, about 500,000 doses, set aside for strategic reserve. That way, if somebody lost doses, we had some wastage, some spillage, we had the ability to quickly replace that. So then we took the rest of it, about 3 million doses, and we allocated that in half of it. So 6 million doses, allocated half of it, 3 million doses, across the jurisdictions. Now, we kept the other half for that all-important second dose. The Pfizer vaccine, 21 days apart, requires that second dose. We wanted to ensure that second dose was available in the quantities that were distributed for the first dose. And so 14 days after a jurisdiction has started to administer the vaccine, they would then order that second dose. Thank you.
Yep. And, with that, there's a committee called the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, and that's working with the CDC, and they provide recommendations to a number of tiered groups and subgroups in a phase sequence. It's not a binary black and white thing. There's phases that can overlap. Now, the overall approving authority is the CDC director for these allocation recommendations at the national level. However, the jurisdictions and the various federal entities will use these recommendations and guidelines and implement them in accordance with their jurisdictional requirements and priorities. And prioritization is based on guidance from the CDC ACIP. It is made first based on population in the states and territories, next based on vaccine volume availability, and then finally by decisions made by the leaders in the states and the territories. And it requires pretty good automation systems to do this. So Ms. Whicker can briefly touch on that.
Thanks, Vic. Yeah, so the last key component of this is a system that was developed called Tiberius. And Tiberius is a giant data system that will provide the underlying data and processes so that we can calculate the allocations available for the vaccine, but also then track the uptake of the vaccine, track the ancillary kits that we have distributed. So all of that information will roll into Tiberius so that we can have full eyes on in terms of making sure our inventory is properly allocated, managed, and monitored. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions are coming in fast and furiously here, so I am copying and pasting and queuing them up here. So let's go with a couple of questions that come in along the lines of how do private physician practices get into the queue for vaccine distribution? Can you guys speak to that just a little bit, please?
Ms. Whicker, you want to take that?
Yeah, I will take that. So each jurisdiction, so we'll just take the state that I happen to be from, Michigan. The providers are rolled into VTREX. So it's really coordination with the state immunization health officer, and then jurisdictions will enroll the providers into VTREX. In order to be able to distribute the vaccination, enrollment and acceptance into VTREX is essential. What's happening early on is, and I can't speak for every state, but states may have been limiting the enrollment early, and again, it's each state jurisdiction that does it, because of the amount of vaccine not being that plentiful. So what I would say is check with your state health officer in terms of their plan to enroll private practices or wherever you're from into VTREX. Over. That's a great question.
Any other responses? Okay, thanks. Thanks, Marion. Another question. Do patients have to go back to the same location site when going back for their second dose? If not, how do they know what vaccination locations have the same vaccine that was administered for their initial dose?
So I'll take this one as well. So obviously going back to the same place is preferred because as we talked about that first and second dose and how vaccines are allocated. So early on, I would recommend that. When vaccine is more plentiful, certainly you can go to different sites. Each state has their own immunization information system that will record patient intake. At a federal level, we don't record any patient data. We are prohibited from gathering PII or PHI, and so that's really done at the state level. However, one of the things that we will do to ensure someone is recording their vaccine is when someone is immunized with the vaccine, we will hand them a paper card. It's just for them to mark down where they got the vaccination, when they got the vaccination, and what type. Because what is the most critical component is if you get the Moderna the vaccination, then it's the Moderna that you need for the second one. But again, emphasizing early on in the process when vaccine is not as plentiful, I would go back to my original administration site. Later on, when it's out at the Walgreens and the Walmarts and all over the place, you probably have more flexibility. Thank you for the question.
Great, thank you very much. Another short question. Are vials labeled first and second dose?
No, they're not. They are labeled according to regulatory. So I'm not a clinician, but the vials will be allocated first and second dose. But it is up to that respective site that is managing their inventory to manage how they're going to do first and second doses. I can tell you, again, I mentioned I was at University of Michigan. One of the things that they're looking at is potentially doing a Pfizer clinic and a separate Moderna clinic so that they can keep their vaccine separate. Again, each jurisdiction and then sub-jurisdiction will manage their practice as to what works best for them.
Thank you very much. Another question, is HHS planning on distributing vaccines to the federal workforce through the Federal Occupational Health Program, or do local FOH offices need to work with their respective state public health authorities?
So there's never really a good answer. There are 5 federal entities that are receiving allocations of vaccines. And it's Department of Defense, Department of State, Bureau of Prisons, Indian
Health Service,
and the VA. Thank you, Vic. And so those are the federal allocations that are being done. Beyond that, it is going to be within the respective jurisdiction where that employee lives. Vic, did you want to add anything more on that?
No, I think that's appropriate for right now. Sure.
Okay, one other question here. Actually, we're going to go to ask 2 more questions here, and then we're going to jump into the next planned question here. And just to let folks know, any unanswered questions that we don't get to today, we'll share with our panelists, and time permitting, we'll ask them to go ahead and compile a response for us. So this gets back to first and second dose. Is the NDC different for the second dose, or is it the same vaccine given twice?
I think Jeff's best to answer that question. Go ahead, Jeff.
It's an easy one. The same vaccine is given twice. There's no difference in the labeling. It all has to do with the availability and allocation as per states. Over.
And this is Darrell Rawlings from McKesson. Jeff, if I could add to that, just for clarity's sake, all of these vaccines are in multi-dose vials, right? So just want to point that out.
Thank you. Here's another question. Once we get past the initial phase and have higher volumes of vaccine into the jurisdictions, how will we manage situations where we have surplus product in one jurisdiction with an expiry date getting moved to others in need prior to the expiration of the vaccine?
Get that. So this is really kind of going back to what was discussed earlier that Ms. Whicker kind of alluded to, which is the sites are going to, in conjunction with the jurisdiction leadership, is going to have to make sure, number one, that they manage the vaccine in accordance with their storage temperatures. So let's say these vaccines are, let's say the Moderna vaccine gets EUA issued this coming weekend. We know that that vaccine is stored at -20. So sites, it behooves sites to not necessarily migrate those vaccines that they know they're not going to administer that week and move that into a 2 to 8 degrees Celsius status, because the timeline for 2 to 8, once you thaw out that vaccine, is only 30 days. So there's got to be management on that site to preserve the longevity of the doses that you know you're not going to use. So the idea is to keep it at its long-term storage temperature as long as possible. So if your vaccine is required at -70 to 80 Celsius, and you don't have to move it out of that ultra-cold freezer because it's in storage temperature for a period of several months, then the idea is to keep it at that rate for several months. Now, when vaccine becomes more plentiful as we migrate into the spring, into the summer, what you're going to see is you're going to see more and more tiered groups open up. So once we clear tier 1, A, B, and C, and we migrate into tiers 2 and 3, you're going to see a lot more people have access to this vaccine. Eventually, you know, like Ms. Whicker said, we want it to be where, let's say by the summertime, if you're just one of those people that haven't decided to go and get a vaccine, but now you've changed your mind and you want to be able to walk into a Walgreens or some other retail outlet, we want to have that situation. Anybody else on the panel that want to address any of the redistribution possibly?
Yeah, Vic, you did a great job. And so the only thing that I would say is a site will get an allocation. They don't have to order against their whole allocation. The allocation can stay and be held at the storage site waiting for them. So we have a phrase that we talk to the jurisdictions: order what you need and use what you order. And so if you keep it like that from an inventory perspective, because when you order from your allocation, it gets shipped out very, very quickly. And so we've talked to the jurisdictions about their ordering cadence and getting it on a regular ability. So Vic, you did a great job.
Thank you. Just a quick tag along. You mentioned 6 cities. Can you let us know what those 6 cities are?
Boy, you put me on the spot for memorizing. Yes. Houston, San Antonio, Chicago, New York, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., I believe. Yeah, Washington, D.C. Those are the 6.
Thank you, panelists, so much. Let's move to our second question here, second program's question. Who are the primary OWS distributors involved in delivery and further dispersal of the vaccines? And what is the extent of their roles? I know you've touched on this a little bit, and I'm sure that as we go along, a lot of these questions will have already answered through responses here. But if you can go into a little bit more detail, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, this is Darrell. I can take this, or at least start, and the rest of us can pipe in. So we at McKesson play the centralized distributor role, and as I'd mentioned previously, Pfizer is doing their product distribution directly, but outside of that, all the other vaccines are coming through the McKesson system. So as a centralized distributor, we will utilize and move through vaccine shipments from our distribution centers to sites of administration. We're utilizing, carriers that would be UPS and FedEx to ensure deliveries, get to the packages actually get to the locations on time. It's a very rapid process that we've developed, and we have been in the business of vaccines for a very long time. And you've probably heard or read some of the experience that we have, but we do, 130 to 150 million doses of vaccines every year. We're the largest flu distributor in the world. We've, had a relationship with the CDC Vaccines for Children's program, which is a lot of this is kind of built from, at least some of it is. So that experience, I think, leads itself well to what we're building here and gives us the ability to reach out and create this success from a distribution perspective. I think that's all I have. Any other comments?
Great. Any other comments from the panelists?
Just from a distribution perspective. So again, with the central distributor, they will be distributing both the product and the kits, and that's really one of the biggest concerns. Is early on, people were concerned that we weren't going to have that critical PPE, and so Darrell and Team McKesson will be taking the vaccines, with exception of the Pfizer, and marrying up the product and the ancillary kits. What Darrell probably didn't talk well enough about is McKesson is also the key kitter for this, and so they are the primary kit builder for both the Pfizer as well as all of the other ancillary kits, ensuring that needles and syringes and alcohol prep pads and all of those key components, and I know we'll talk about that later, but McKesson is also doing that. So McKesson plays a huge role in the distribution process of these critical vaccines. Over.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. All right, let's jump into some of the questions from our audience. For our logistics experts, tracking information is important. Is that information readily available for each receiving entity? Do designated vaccination sites get tracking information on their ancillary product kits so they have a clear understanding of when their supplies will arrive in parallel with the vaccine?
So yes, this is Darrell Rawlings, and so tracking it is a real interesting aspect that we're actually doing some new stuff with FedEx and UPS. So yes, tracking information will be provided not only for the vaccines but for the ancillary kits that Ms. Whicker talked about. They can be tracked throughout the normal process as you would any package that's traveling through its normal stage of scanning. We're also layering on a bit of new technology that helps us. We don't know if you're going to be able to see it, but we can see kind of general movement throughout the entire supply chain, which means kind of what they're calling like a Bluetooth technology that adds another layer of security from our perspective. So you'll be able to see scan data. We'll be able to even track it further in case there's any delays. But it's a lot of new technology being deployed here, and certainly you'll be able to see scan data as it relates to the products coming your way.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that. Here's another question. Will there be a separate distribution process for mass vaccination conducted by state and local authorities at large outpatient clinics? Will the distribution process for the vaccines, what will the distribution process for the vaccines be once they're widely available?
So I'll take this, and then anybody else wants to jump in. So again, as we mentioned, 64 jurisdictions, and so potentially 64 different ways of how a jurisdiction is going to choose to allocate their vaccines. And so as vaccines become more plentiful, a jurisdiction may want to look at mass vac sites. That may work better for them. It'll be depending on the number of providers they have enrolled in. But again, I can't stress enough that those types of things would be a function and a decision of the respective jurisdictions.
What I'd like to also add, this is Vic Suarez, is that in this first wave, in accordance with the CDC ACIP guidance, is the majority of the big pushes are going to be to locations that can most easily and are most capable of handling the vaccine, and that's the large medical systems, the healthcare systems, those federal entities that have those capabilities, and also the facilities that are going to be going into our long-term healthcare facilities for those that are at most risk, and there's partnerships with other organizations, big retail chains like Walgreens and CVS to assist with that. But those are kind of where a lot of the first doses are going to go to address that frontline healthcare worker population and then those in congregate living facilities. Over.
Thank you. Here's another question. Working in a hospital setting, how do we judge order volumes for patients and staff knowing that individuals have choices? Any advice that you could give our provider attendees?
So I can only relay what has been relayed to me. And I've talked to family members who are medical professionals, and what they're doing is actually surveying people. Again, I'll just use University of Michigan as a point of reference. They did a survey prior to the vaccine coming out to see where the people were, and then from then on, then they kind of did other things. So I would say the first part is survey your workforce, and you can put the people into two buckets: those that are currently interested in the vaccine. You may want to ask a three-part question: are you currently interested in the vaccine? Do you want to wait a while, or are you a no? And that's how I would do it. Over. And
to tag on that, that's what I'm hearing as well. Every state and within the states, they have large organizations. So you might have in your community, let's say, a county fire department, and they'll go ahead and take the initiative, and they'll do a poll with all their firefighters and say, hey, give us an idea of all those that want to voluntarily take the vaccine, when first offered. And then they'll get maybe a sense of those people that are just, they don't want to refuse taking it, but maybe they want to be on a standby list. And then those that just clearly say they don't want. And then now that they are able to have that data and then work with their county health departments and other, state jurisdiction leaders so that they can get a certain amount of allocation that makes sense for their population. So we don't over request vaccines where it's not necessary. Over.
Other questions, but just for time's sake, I'd like to go ahead and jump into our third question because there's actually quite a few questions around this. There are a number of unique challenges associated with COVID-19 vaccines: security, multi-dose injections, cold chain monitoring, and specific requirements associated with the Pfizer vaccine, including a minimum storage temperature of -70 degrees. What recommendations, contingency plans do you or should you have, and should the healthcare organization have for vaccine storage, handling, and distribution?
Sure. This is Vic again, Vic Suarez. I'll take the first part of this and address really kind of from the security standpoint. So the security of our vaccines that are coming out are the concurrent responsibilities of the manufacturer, the contract manufacturing organizations like Catalent and the fill finish sites like Catalent and Lonza for Moderna, and then Pfizer's doing their own manufacturing. There's local physical, there's data security measures that are being placed. We have a whole department looking at all that at the federal level. There's third-party logistics vendors and common carriers that also have to have physical and data security measures in place. And then handling agencies such as Warp Speed, CDC, McKesson, state and territory boards of health, and finally immunization locations, all have to play an important role in securing this vaccine and making sure that not only is it protected from cold chain deviations or excursions, but also just the integrity of the product, and it's accounted for in all states of distribution. Now, the nodes of the vaccine locations with the in-transit carriers follow closely temperature monitoring, right? They're using state-of-the-art monitoring devices, data loggers, and we're also using a lot of continuous new technology to monitor this with GPS technology. We use advanced shipment notices, arrival confirmations and acceptances. And finally, we're using federal law enforcement like U.S. Marshals to escort some of the bigger movements, but there's also coordination at the local level for local law enforcement for some of the smaller movements that we have. And there's to some extent, some private security at the various sites to secure the vaccine to ensure that to the American people, this vaccine, it's well taken care of. So I'll pass it over to Ms. Whicker and Jeff, who can, address the questions about, the complications with multi-dose injections, shot cards, and other issues. Over.
I'll let you go first. They've heard from me quite a bit, and then I'll pile on.
Okay. From a concept of securing the vaccine, there's a number of planning issues that you can take care of ahead of time, such as the states have been queried through OWS conversations with regard to how indeed they're going to be handling -80 vaccine. And they're centralized based on the location of deep freezers within the state and using a hub and spoke process of storage and local distribution. And then also that the insulated container used by Pfizer has the ability to be refreshed with dry ice for up to 20 days, with the first shipment of replenishment dry ice being generated along with the first shipment. And then local entities can refresh the dry ice and use that as a temporary storage container for their vaccine. So the onus really is on the local agencies once the vaccine arrives at its initial destination, and making sure that they have plans indeed for not only utilizing the vaccine and the multi-dose vials in which it's contained, but also the longer-term secure aspect of holding on to the vaccines. Over.
And then I'll just take a little bit different route from there. So when you think about the vaccines with multi-dose injections, there's going to be 3 levels of review that we'll do. First, as I mentioned, that shot card. So that's the individual's record. And we need to talk about that. That is just simply an individual's record. It is not an official government document or anything like that. It is, in my case, Marion Whicker's personal record of when I received the vaccination, which one it was, and when I'm due back. Second, reports will be made to the CDC regarding individuals who were immunized, making sure that none of their HIPAA data or anything was in there. And then finally, the state immunization areas and the local areas will have records for the recipients. Again, the important thing to remember is that all important date in between your vaccines. If it's the Pfizer vaccine, it's 21 days from first injection to the second injection. And then as Moderna, if it receives its EUA, that will be 28 days. Darrell, I'll turn it over to you.
important question in regards to just cold chain handling, and as was mentioned, the -70 concerns. The team has thought through that in a large way, and the keynote for me is we are not involved with the Pfizer, but we are involved with Moderna, and Moderna has its own set of requirements as it relates to cold chain. So from McKesson's perspective, we're involved with cold chain from the very beginning processes of manufacturer transfer into the distribution chain. And so there's a lot of activity that goes around ensuring cold chain integrity, making sure that alarms don't go off and that we are clearly comfortable with the product, that it's been handled and managed the way that the manufacturer has tested for. Then we go through a process of ensuring that we are pick, packing, and shipping for Moderna products specifically in literally a -20 environment. So our employees are actually pick, packing, and shipping in that environment. And then when we actually ship the product, we include an indicator. So when you open up the package, which is actually, there's one behind me, there's actually a quick set of instructions on how to ensure that the product has full temperature integrity, and you literally push a button and it validates that the product has been held within the appropriate standards, and then you can accept the product. So, inside that package also is, if you have a problem, there's a number to call that McKesson works with the CDC on to ensure that we handle any what we call excursions and replace product if necessary, though we do not expect to do that.
The Pfizer vaccine will be shipped direct from 2 Pfizer locations out to the designated areas where the orders have been placed by the states through the CDC and the VTRAC system. Accompanying each shipment will be a temperature monitor that is GPS enabled. And that monitor, although it will be shut off at its destination, can be easily reprogrammed to also monitor the temperature for the next 20 days on site. So there are backups associated with temperature monitoring as well, in addition to McKesson's handling of the Moderna vaccine. Pfizer has a similar mode. Over.
Yeah, and really what's important here too is that there's a lot of information here, but I'd ask the host to go to slide 6 and then 7. Both Moderna and Pfizer have established websites. If you can go to slides, I think, there we go. Both Moderna and Pfizer have established websites for specific vaccine handling recommendations, storage, and in particular on the Moderna vaccine carton, for example, that I've been able to touch and handle. They have a QR code that even for the site, if you scan that QR code, you can get real-time data on the Moderna vaccine on that particular lot. You can see all the things that are in the Moderna website or the Pfizer website, and you could even see things like shelf life extensions. If their stability data say, hey, we can actually go to 9 months for, let's say, -20, that'll be in there in that QR code. Or if there's any like lot recall information, that's also going to be embedded in the QR code. Also, when you look at the slide here, it's a lot of information. So that's why it's important to be able to go to the Pfizer website as well as the CDC guidance there. And then the FDA has their EUA authorization. That's important there because the EUA FDA authorization website has the specific FDA-approved healthcare provider fact sheet. That is absolutely critical because that is the acceptable standard for healthcare providers and those that support the healthcare providers, and a lot of detailed storage and handling information. If you can go to this next slide for the Moderna vaccine, it's the same way, right? We have some product handling information here as well as Moderna's website. Their EUA website is not live, so if you try to go to that right now, it's not going to happen. But we talked to Moderna this morning, and as soon as EUA is granted, they're going to go live, and all that information is going to be available to not only supply chain professionals, but clinicians at large. Over.
There's, again, a number of questions around this, but I want to save time for our last question here. So let me go through and ask this question. What is the anticipated time frame how long OWS will be in charge of the distribution of the vaccine? Will it then transition to commercial doses being available at physician offices in addition to larger retailers?
Ms. Whicker, do you want to take that?
Yeah, so I'll take this first. So there really isn't a magical time frame when things will transition other than we see more doses roll out. When you think about Pfizer and Moderna and what we've seen committed, it's about each one of them 20 million doses a month for the American people. And so by the time you get through medical professionals in the first month or two and then move on to long-term health care facilities, it as you've probably seen on TV, we're anticipating end of March, early into spring, vaccines being more plentiful for all of America. So Operation Warp Speed will continue to work the process as long as we're asked to be here and work it and help the CDC with the distribution of the vaccines. So there really isn't a particular time frame. And again, allocations will be based on that ACIP prioritization that Vic has talked about, and then again, how many doses are available, and then based on a pro rata basis from there. Over.
Right. And so the other thing to consider too is that this is not a typical product launch of a couple different products that if for those on the line that are in the biopharma industry and have ever taken any products through the FDA regulatory process, this is not at all your typical product launch. Normal product launch of a vaccine would be you're not even going into the mass manufacturing phase until you've received your BLA, and that campaign launch is going to be 6 months to 9 months. And sometimes it will take over a year to get to full manufacturing cadence. We've shrunk that down by doing that parallel manufacturing at scale while we were doing phase 3 trials and prior to any authorization or license. So that's why you're seeing this at warp speed. So the other thing to consider too is the life cycle process of a biologic or a drug that's going to a marketplace. For this coming year in 2021, this is going to be a USG push, right? The goal is to get these products to licensure, but secondarily, we want to make enough vaccine doses so that everybody that wants a vaccine that's in the United States can get a vaccine by this summer. Everyone that can do it. Now, as we try to transition into 2022, that's yet to be determined at what time does the products migrate from being a USG pushed product into a commercial product that you would normally see in the traditional, launch into the commercial marketplace where you start negotiating with, insurance companies and other, pharmacy benefit managers and all those types of things with insurance. That's to be determined, but that is probably not going to happen until the 22 cycle. Over.
Thank you, Vic. All right, I'm going to go and cover one more question here. Actually, we're going to cover two. One deals with chain of custody. But the first one here is, I understand that the vaccine may not be identified as traditional pharmaceutical product. Specifically, the DSCSA marking may be absent and the expiry date may be an artificial date in the future as the actual expiry date may not yet be known. Would any of the panelists be able to speak to this?
I can address that. Stability studies are ongoing, and the initial start of the stability studies come from the first batches that are validation batches, and anything there would be contributory towards those stability studies. So consequently, what is going on is that the expiration date, the minimal expiration date, will be available for each of the vaccines, such as Pfizer has 6 months of -80 data, and Moderna has 3 months of -20 data. And as that data comes off, we will know more about the extension of the expiration date, just as we would with any other launch of a vaccine. where that stability data continues on through a course of time. So consequently, under emergency use authorization, there will be QR barcodes on the cartons themselves, which will link you, as Vic had described earlier, to the website, which talks about individual lots and their expiration dates as the stability studies move on. Over.
Right. And the good news is we work very closely with the Moderna chemistry, manufacturing, controls team and their technical team. And as of a couple of weeks ago, they officially are at 6 months at -20, and then transition to 2 to 8 for 30 days. So the Moderna vaccine is also at 6 months at -20. Over.
Thank you. Last question for this section revolves around chain of custody. So if the lot number is entered on the patient's vaccination card, do all parties who touch the vaccine need to keep detailed records of lots received, stored, shipped? Is there required documentation for chain of custody and or chain of cold custody with internal redistribution of the vaccine?
Jeff, do you want to take that?
Yeah, when it comes, certainly the chain of custody is very clear on shipments from Pfizer and shipments from Moderna through McKesson. That's very clear. And the extension of the ability to track temperature extends to, for Pfizer, extends to the use of the temperature monitor and the reactivation of it as long as the temperature, as long as the vaccine stays with the container. However, it shifts over to a responsibility in the field where the vaccine is transferred to a storage location, such as a -80 freezer or a -20 freezer, and those should be monitored locally. If it should need to be transferred, if the vaccine should need to be transferred by ground transportation past that, it really is the responsibility of the local departments of health and counties to be able to monitor those on an individual basis. Over.
To the Moderna side, and Vic, keep me honest here on the information, but as many of you are probably aware, there's this in the middle of this slide, there's this 30 days at 2 to 8. When we ship the vaccine, we'll be shipping it at -20 in a -20 container. When you receive the product, you'll be putting it away into -20 or 2 to 8. And that's when you need to, as the one that now has possession of the vaccines, keep track of the temperatures and the timing. That 30 days is a critical component if you're putting it away at 2 to 8.
Add for emphasis with the Moderna vaccine in particular is if you have the capability of storing the Moderna vaccine upon arrival at the same temperature range that it was shipped at -20, that preserves the vaccine for as long as possible, like I stated, up to 6 months. It only makes sense to bring it down into a thawed state at 2 to 8 normal refrigeration when you know you're going to administer that vaccine either that day or that week for sure. So you want to, by all means, keep it at -20 as long as you can and always preserve your flexibility and preserve the product, because the product is actually it's more stabilized at a frozen state than it is at a thawed state. It's still somewhat pretty resilient. Moderna's done a pretty good job in the last several years of their formulation to make it as stable as possible, and they have a lot of internal data that shows that. But we want to make sure that the sites out there store it as much as possible at -20 until administration. The healthcare provider fact sheet go into detail of the time to thaw and all the procedures that your providers and those clinicians need to know to properly administer the vaccine on the healthcare provider fact sheets located on the EUA website there. Over.
Thank you for those responses. All right, question 4. It is understood that the vaccines and supplies to support vaccination will follow separate logistics channels and converge at some point in the delivery chain. Where does this convergence occur? At the distributor, hospital location, immunization clinic, or healthcare provider.
Take that, and if we can go to slide number 12, please. Oh, we're going to discuss it in really two ways. So first for the Moderna ancillary kits, as well as all of the other vaccines except for Pfizer, will be built on a 100-dose kit. Okay. What we're going to do, though, is put 105% of the requirement in there to account for some wastage and spillage. And so what you'll see, and this chart outlines it very well, are the types of, you'll have needles and syringes, 1 inch and 1.5 inch needles and accompanying syringes. You'll have face shields and face masks for that administrator to be doubly protected. You'll have alcohol wipes to prep the arm. And then you'll have the vaccination shot card that we showed earlier in one of the pictures, and what we call a needle card. It is a information card that talks about the different types of needles and what they would be used for, what age groups. Right now we're only vaccinating adults, and so you would look for the sizes appropriate with the adults. But as mentioned earlier, with the Moderna vaccine and its ancillary kit will be married up at one of the McKesson distribution sites, and then it will be shipped out to the admin site together, either via FedEx or UPS. Now, if you go to the next slide, let's talk about the Pfizer kit, which is a little bit more complicated kit. So the Pfizer vaccine is built in packages of 195 vials in what we affectionately call a pizza tray. If you think about the size of a personal pan pizza box, it's a 9-inch by 9-inch by 1-inch deep box that 195 vials go. That is the lowest common denominator that Pfizer currently ships it out. And each vial contains 5 doses of vaccine. So 195 times those 5 critical doses is 975. So the ancillary kit for Pfizer will be shipped in terms of 975 doses. We rounded it up to 1,000 doses so that, again, we have that overage for needles and syringes and alcohol prep pads. But I want to talk a little bit about what's in that Pfizer box that people are already receiving. And there's 3 main components. Number 1, the Pfizer vaccine requires dilution. So there is 195 vials of diluent in that package, in the overall Pfizer box. There are the appropriate needles and syringes necessary to extract the diluent and put it into the vaccine. So you have what we call the mixing kit. And then finally, you'll have the appropriate amount of needles and syringes, again, face masks and face shields, alcohol wipes for both the vial that you're extracting from as well as the arm, and then the documentation card as well as a needle card. So the Pfizer kit you'll get in a much bigger box. I think if you go to the next slide, we've got some examples of what they look like. So for the Pfizer kit, you'll see there that's the label. Rather than doing multiple shipments, we were able to, again, with the teamwork of McKesson, package all of the contents in one box. So rather than having a separate shipment for the diluent, the mixing kit, and the administration kit, all of that will come in one large box. Could you go to the next slide, please? And that's really what the size of the box will look like. And so many of these sites have already received these. We shipped them out at the end of last week, Wednesdays and Thursdays. And so as you receive these boxes, make sure that you inventory against what the contents show on the outside so that you have everything accounted for. Next slide, please. Just a quick picture inside. What you see right there is that box is full to the brim with all of the things that I talked about. Just on the top there, you'll see the appropriate face shields and face masks. So again, for the Moderna vaccine, it'll be shipped out in 100-dose packages, 10 vials, 10 doses per vial, and so that ancillary kit is built on a 100-dose regimen, and then the Moderna or the Pfizer is built on 975. Now that's for the first dose. As a site begins administering that second dose, they'll get the same thing again. They'll get the Pfizer kit that will come back and again facilitate 975 doses of that critical second dose. Thank you.
I'd like to add something on the ancillary supplies, and that is, please don't underestimate the space needed for them. Each package is about 2 feet by 2 feet by 2 feet, and if you multiply that by the number of doses, you're going to need storage space for the ancillary supplies and be able to call them up to match up with the vaccine upon immunization. So keep in mind the storage needed for the ancillary supplies. Over.
That's a great point. All right, we've got just a few minutes left. I'd like to jump to the last question we have here for the panelists, and that is, where can we find more detailed information regarding specific vaccine storage, handling, and any other information related to the program?
And so I'll take that. And so there are numerous websites, and I'll tell you the first place I always go for personal information is the CDC website. So I go there as an informed citizen. I go there as a member of Operation Warp Speed, and so I would tell everybody to go there. On the CDC website, you'll be able to find the interim playbook for the jurisdictions. Interestingly enough, for all of the jurisdictions, they actually have an executive summary of their respective plans. I went there and was able to read about my home state, so I would encourage you to go there. As Vic has mentioned earlier, you've got the Pfizer website, and we can make sure that, Mike, that these get out to all of the people attending. And then Vic also mentioned Moderna with the release of the Moderna vaccine, should it get the emergency use authorization. We'll have a Moderna site, but we'll ensure that all the participants have a copy of those websites. Teammates, if anybody else has any other websites they'd like to mention, please do.
As mentioned before, I'll just reiterate that each of the sites will be updating, that is, the manufacturers' websites will be updating information as it comes off. In particular, the changes might to look for maybe ones associated with the stability profile of each of the lots associated. Over.
And as Ms. Whicker mentioned, we will have a slide that will have links to the various sites that will provide more detailed information for you and follow-up information as well. One of the questions related to the information available, will there be an example of a consent form for the vaccination?
Take that. That actually came up this morning on a call I had with some CDC colleagues, and from the federal level, that's not a requirement for this vaccine for a consent form. Typically, we see the consent forms being associated with a clinical trial and under trial conditions. However, what is being provided in the EUA document on the FDA site and what's going to be available to all the healthcare providers is really a fact sheet that's for the people that are the participants. And all the sites are encouraged to share that piece of information so that anybody that volunteers to take this vaccine has all the facts that is written in a way, and it's going to be, I think, translated in a couple other common languages so that participants, volunteers who want to learn more about the vaccine can look at the Pfizer one right now on their EUA website, and then when the Moderna one comes out, participants can look exactly for what is going on with that particular vaccine, and they can learn everything about it. But there is no federal mandate for an informed consent form at the local level at this time at all. Over.
Thank you, Vic. Appreciate that information. So we've got just a couple of minutes left, and I know there's been a lot of conversation around it's really unprecedented if you think about it, how quickly these vaccines have come to market. I understand we've got a brief video here that really explains how these vaccines were quickly and safely developed.
Operation Warp Speed is a fast-paced effort to develop and deliver COVID-19 vaccines to the American people. I'm Paul Ostrowski, Operation Warp Speed's Director of Supply, Production, and Distribution. And here are 5 things to know about how Operation Warp Speed accelerated the vaccine timeline with 0 shortcuts in the science. First, Operation Warp Speed leveraged the great work and advancements of scientists over the past decade to focus on proven platforms as the foundation of vaccine development. Second, we prepared for all phases of clinical trials simultaneously, from site setup to registration, so we could move from phase 1, think of tens of people, to phase 2, think of hundreds of people, and then phase 3, think of 30,000 or more participants, with little or no additional waiting time in between. Third, we prioritized the supply chain for raw materials in support of Operation Warp Speed through the use of the Defense Production Act to avoid delays in manufacturing. Simply put, we put ourselves at the front of the line for raw materials as well as manufacturing equipment. Fourth, we harmonized and increased the size of phase 3 clinical trials to 30,000 people or more to demonstrate effectiveness and collect important data sooner. Bottom line, the more people you have in a trial, the faster you get to your endpoint. And fifth, Operation Warp Speed took investment risk in manufacturing vaccine doses simultaneously to phase 3 trials. That way, if a vaccine is proven safe and effective, we are ready to distribute it immediately to the American people. Learn more about Operation Warp Speed on the HHS and DoD websites.
Produced by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services at taxpayer expense.
So again, a really brief video, and I understand some of you were unable to see or hear the video, so we will work to make the video, the 2-minute video is available already. We'll work with our counterparts here at the OWS to make this last video available as well. So with that, please join me in thanking our esteemed panelists here. Again, Ms. Marion Whicker, and I apologize for saying Whitaker early on, so my apologies again. Ms. Marion Whicker, Colonel Victor Suarez, Mr. Geoffrey Glauser, and Mr. Darrell Rawlings. You all have provided us with excellent detailed information and certainly a bevy of information to take back to our teams. Again, for our audience, questions that we were unable to get to today just due to time constraints, we will share with our panelists, and time permitting, we will have them respond and we'll share those back with you. Again, please let us know what you think of today's presentation by completing the survey, which will pop up as an external site at the conclusion of today's webinar. Again, thank you, panelists, for a very engaging session today and a lot of information, great information you shared with us. Audience, thank you. We know that this is a little bit beyond the typical time frame for our webinars, but we felt it was necessary given the amount of information we were covering, and appreciate you making time out of your busy schedules to spend it with us. Be safe, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.